To help us explore the global implications of the elections, we're now joined by Paolo Mauri, a military expert from Rome, and Tobias Belgrano, an international relations researcher from Buenos Aires. Welcome both to our program.
Good evening, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Let me start off with Mr. Mauri. What are Russia's primary interests when it comes to the upcoming US elections? Do they favor a certain candidate, and do they believe if one of them wins or the other, that it could possibly affect their interests within the Europe?
I think that Moscow is looking at this U.S. election with a certain degree of interest because both candidates does not see as in the same way the support of Ukraine. First of all, in one side we have Kamala Harris that she told that she will continue in the Biden's line. So the support of Ukrainian forces will continue with money, will continue with the weapons, will continue with the missiles and whatever. In the other side, we have Donald Trump that has not a clear line toward the Ukrainian war. First of all, he said that he wasn't for to continue the military support of Ukrainian forces. Then he moderate a little bit this point of view since when he spoke with President Zelensky. After that meeting, the thing that we just know is that they agreed to, in a kind of way, to continue the U.S. support. But first of all, it's my opinion that the most weight of military support in case clearly of Trump of the winning on Donald Trump, it will be under the NATO's European allies. So I guess that the U.S. will in some way push the European allies to continue this military aid and to focus primarily on the Far East, primarily clearly about the same China and Taiwan and the South China Sea.
Okay, if we could move to Mr. Belgrano and get his opinion as well. How can the US election results affect American relations with European allies? Specifically, as Mr. Mauri had spoken about, Donald Trump himself seems to be more of an isolationist and is willing to pull out of things like NATO and, pull out of Europe in general. Do you think this could possibly affect relations with European allies?
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, of course. I believe that a victory of Donald Trump could affect and generate more tensions between the U.S. and its allies. We have to dig over in the past when in the previous presidency of Donald Trump, where tensions, especially with Germany, for claims for former U.S. President Donald Trump for its security and for the payments of its security, would generate further tensions with the European allies. Also, and furthermore, Donald Trump, as my colleague clearly stated, has already affirmed that there's an intention of moving forward with a peace talk with Russia, especially promoted by his VP candidate JD Vance. So yeah, I would argue to say that it's probable that tensions will arise with the U.S. allies in Europe, and if Donald Trump is elected. If Kamala Harris is elected, I think as my colleague was also correctly saying, there will be a line of continuance of the current administration's actions in Europe of moving forward with more support for Ukraine. However, I would not underestimate the internal and domestic lack of interest that U.S. citizens are having on keeping participating in foreign wars when the domestic agenda is struggling inside, and especially on
Sir, do you think that they may possibly, even if Harris wins, they may cut back slightly when it comes to aid?
I think there will be a little setbacks slightly, but not as concrete as if Donald Trump is elected.
Okay, Mr. Mauri, how might the outcome of the elections influence the future when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war and U.S. military support in general for Ukraine? Because obviously both parties are very interested and very invested in who wins this election.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
The question was, like, how will the election results itself, whether Harris wins or Trump wins, influence how the Ukraine-Russia war is handled and how the U.S. military supports Ukraine? Do you think it is going to affect the outcome of what's happening right now there?
Well, yes. First, let me precise one thing. The U.S. foreign policy for the main questions have a kind of fil rouge between Republicans and Democrats. Not so different point of view when it comes to think about Russia, think about China, think about Iran and whatever. But it's there are slightly differences. In this case, I think that in case of the winning of Donald Trump, he will try to freeze the conflict and he will try to speak in some way with the Kremlin. So that's why Moscow looks with very interest at these elections. If Kamala will win, I don't think that there will be a major setback of the military aids from the U.S. I think that even Kamala, even Democrats will push the NATO allies to be more proactive in the military sustainment of Ukraine. But let me clear more. This will be in any cases one thing that both the candidates will have to do because of the internal struggle. Because we have seen an America that is divided internally. So they will primarily try to address this main question and then the Russian dossier. But let's remember that the main dossier for Democrats and Republicans, it remains China.
Okay, before we continue talking about this topic, let's first take a look at this report about the potential outcomes of a Trump or Harris presidency. So stay with us.
Among the major challenges awaiting the next American president will be handling relations with Russia, especially given its ongoing war with Ukraine. Experts believe that Harris's policy toward Russia would likely follow the same path as Biden's, given that U.S. aid to Kiev has already exceeded billions of dollars, alongside continued political and diplomatic support and NATO's leadership in confronting Russia.
If Donald Trump were president, Vladimir Putin will be sitting in Kyiv.
Trump, on the other hand, has repeatedly stated he could end the war in Ukraine within days or hours. Experts see that Trump would not only aim to end the war, but also likely work on significantly reduce American support for NATO.
Many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are dying. These cities are being obliterated. And basically they say, what's your stance? Are you for Russia or are you for... I'm for one thing very simple. I want to stop people from getting killed, and I'll have it stop.
On the Russian side, President Vladimir Putin recently stated that the future of U.S.-Russia relations following the U.S. presidential election will depend on Washington's approach.
Если Соединенные Штаты открыты к строительству нормальных отношений с Россией, то и мы будем делать то же самое. Не хотят, не надо.
Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, who currently serves as deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, recently stated that the results of the U.S. election will not change anything for Russia. He also stressed that the positions of both candidates reflect a consensus between the two parties, Democrats and Republicans, on the necessity of defeating Russia.
Welcome back. We're still on with Mr. Paolo Mauri as well as Mr. Tobias Bellagrano. Thank you both for waiting with us. Let me start off again with Mr. Bellagrano. What impact could a Trump or Harris victory actually have on NATO, specifically on the idea of funding or expansion? Because I know both have very different views when it comes to NATO.
Well, as we said before, I think we should check on the previous administration of Donald Trump and how he related with NATO, claiming the need of security funds that U.S. should not pay for security funds in Europe. I would be a little careful in thinking that the Republicans and Democrats are slightly different. In this case, we're seeing the rise of Donald Trump promising to wipe out the establishment of Washington, D.C., and moving with a more radical agenda. So I would think it would be a great difference if Trump is reelected once again, especially in the relations with in relations with alliances like NATO. And that would impact necessarily on Russia's conflict. I think Trump this time it will be a little more radical than the previous time, and this might change the entire approach to Europe. And what I was saying regarding Kamala Harris and her relationship with NATO and Europe, I think that she would move forward with Biden's agenda, but internal and domestically, Americans are fed up with going to in foreign wars, and I think that would be an internal pressure that could affect European relations in Harris administration.
Okay, Mr. Mowry, does Moscow favor a specific candidate, or is it prioritizing long-term strategies independent of results, regardless of who wins, whether Trump or Harris?
Well, yeah, I don't think that Moscow literally prioritize one candidate or another one, but I think that the Kremlin will look at in a certain kind of way if Donald Trump really will put on all the things that he said during this electoral campaign. But let me just say one thing. We, as already mentioned, we already had a Trump administration, and what Trump did versus Russia. First of all, Trump augmented the military presence, the U.S. military presence in Europe. He sent more troops in Europe. Secondly, it was the Trump administration was the first one to send ATGM anti-tank guided missile to Ukraine. So we have to face the history before trying to say what will come in future. So it's for that I don't think that we will see a major switch, but certainly Moscow will see Donald Trump like someone you can speak with more than Kamala Harris.
Okay. Mr. Baclarano, how could economic relations between the US and Europe shift based on the election results? Because one candidate is quite a bit of an isolationist, where he believes in, America first and American made and all of that. While Harris also believes in tariffs and all of that, but not necessarily with Europe. Do you think that it could affect economic relations?
This moving forward with a more isolationist and protectionist agenda, this will affect in foreign investments in Europe and the possibility of European companies of exporting their products to the U.S. and to the U.S. consumers. So I do believe that a Trump presidency would affect the economic relations between Europe and the United States, and especially if we'd also move forward with an economic war once again with China from the U.S. if Trump is elected. So we probably see how also European countries that are connected with China will be affected in this sense.
Okay, I'm sorry I have to cut you off there, but we're sort of out of time for this episode. Thank you so much both. That was Paolo Mowry, a military expert joining us from Rome, and Tobias Belgrano, an international relations researcher joining us from Buenos Aires.